Hey everyone, thank you for joining me for another episode of Think Your Way to an Epic Life. And today's guest is a licensed psychotherapist. He's a sports psychology expert, and he's also a high performance coach. And our discussion is so good. You will get so many tips and tricks that will help your life. Just check it out. If you like it, share it with your friends. Thanks so much. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us for Think Your Way to an Epic Life.
Karen, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on your show.
It's fun. I've been looking forward to this for quite some time now.
Me
So
too.
so you are a sports psychologist, which we talked about at the beginning. What drew you to that?
Yeah, well, I'm technically not a sports psychologist, but because I don't have a PhD, but I work with athletes around mental performance. But most people that they understand, oh, you're a sports psychologist. Like, well, yeah, basically, I don't have the honorary title, but yes, I work with a lot of athletes. I do mental performance coaching with athletes and also with executives, entrepreneurs, business owners, people that typically perform at a high level or have a lot of demands on them. And they have like a desire or a hunger for that. And so that's a different type of personality. And it's okay to be that way if that's the way you're wired. And I love working with those kinds of people. I'm wired similarly. So really, my interest started back when I was a teenager. I started bicycle racing. I discovered this amazing sport called bicycle racing. I had no idea that it existed. Did my first race, got totally hooked. And I did that all through high school, pursued it as a profession after high school, decided to delay college, much to the chagrin of relatives and friends, right? But I encourage anyone out there, if you feel a passion for something, and you have some talent and you're decent at it or good at it, like go for it. So one life, you got to check it out. So I did that until I was about 24, and I would say more or less maxed out. But in retrospect, working with athletes in psychology, I saw a couple of plateaus that I hit, and so part of my desire in working with athletes is to tell them, not necessarily tell them, but share the story that I have of hitting like a plateau and not going above that, kind of playing it safe and going, well, you know what? My best friend, who is a better bike racer than me, he just quit and he's going to school. He's getting practical. He's getting real. Um, so I decided to kind of get real, get realistic, get practical, go to college. Don't necessarily regret it. It's a path I chose in life. But I have a lot of insight and a lot of experience in athletics working as a professional athlete. I got to a pretty decent level. I raced against Lance Armstrong a couple times. I was at that level. Wasn't over in Europe doing the Tour de France. I was here in the United States. But reached a level where there's a lot of demands on me, and I learned a lot about myself and my own psychology. And like I said, I was like, in retrospect, oh, there was that one point where I needed to push harder mentally to make it to that next level. And who knows if I would have made it to the next level or not, but that's really my passion, is working with high performing individuals who have this desire to achieve, to pursue things. And so that's the basic story of how I got into what I'm doing today.
Okay, very interesting. So you mentioned, like at the beginning, I made the mistake of saying that you were a sports psychologist,
Yeah.
and you corrected me that because you don't have the PhD. And then,
Yeah.
no, let me finish because this is very important. You don't have what the world says is the rubber stamp.
Right.
However, almost every PhD that I deal with says, yeah, I have the paper, but I learned so much more outside of academia than I ever learned inside. Can you speak to
Yeah.
that?
Absolutely. I think I've read a lot and studied a lot. I wouldn't say I have a PhD level of a study and rigor, but that is more important, is what you're doing in the real world and what you're learning there. Absolutely. And I've talked to PhDs as well, and they say like, yeah, you learn much more in the application of what you're doing than you do in prepping and studying and getting the actual piece of paper. But that said, I respect the title, and so I'm not one of those people. I wouldn't, if I had a PhD, I wouldn't say you must call me doctor, right? That annoys me a little bit, but I get it. It's a lot of work. But yeah, it is much more important to be applying it. And also for myself, having real world experience in sports and actually, I don't know any psychologist who doesn't have any sports experience. Like I've never met one. They all have some sports experience. Um, but that is the most important thing. Real world experience, like I said. Yeah. Yeah.
So what is the tie-in between the sports world and psychologists all being into it? What do you think the tie-in is there?
The tie-in between athletes and getting into sports psychology.
Yeah.
Well, I think that if you really want to learn about yourself, you don't necessarily have to, but if you push yourself to do some hard things, you do learn a lot about yourself, be it climbing a mountain or pursuing some sort of a degree or doing a business or getting married or whatever the endeavor is, where you're challenged outside of your comfort zone. You really learn about yourself. So athletes, I think, have a curiosity into their mindset and psychology. Either through, for example, I've met a number of sports psychologists who were forced out of their sport through an injury. It's like a career-ending injury, which is brutal. That never happened to me, but think about that. If you're, say, in the prime of your life in your 20s and you tear your knee or something and you can't do your sport, like, boy, you learn about yourself, and pivoting, and you probably get some depression going on there. Also, sports psychologists who stayed in their sport and achieved a lot, I've found maybe don't go on to sports psychology. Like they've saturated like everything, they squeezed everything out of that particular part of their life, and there's no longer an interest there. They don't even coach, they don't do anything. They're just like, I'm done, right? I've seen that. And I've seen people more who haven't fully like wrung out the dish rag, if you will, on their sport, get into coaching and get into sports psychology and things like that, because there's still something in there that's, I want to share this. There's still like a desire or hunger there to do more around sports. So that's my theory anyway.
Okay. So what would you say the commonalities are between a world-class athlete and a CEO of a Fortune 500 company?
Yeah, I think competitiveness, just to be honest. That's really it. It's just the desire to compete and win. And you can do that in an egotistical way, or you can do it in a way that helps a lot of people as well, and have a team work with you and do good things in the world. So competitiveness is not necessarily like a bad thing. But that is the commonality, is there's this sort of this burning desire, this energy of like, I want to chase this dream. I want to something that's really hard to reach and get. Like I like that, and I like to compete against other people for whatever reason, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So how long have you been coaching? That you don't just coach athletes, you coach anyone in the higher levels of basically anything. So you have to take what you've learned in sports and what you learned in your psychology to apply it to something that you know nothing about, yet you're still getting results. How does that work?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I've never been a CEO. Absolutely not. I know a couple personally. I've opened my own business, so I got some real world experience there. But I would say that it is that same pursuit or drive or competitiveness of, if you compare, say, for example, someone is at a top level in their sport. They may be dominating, but there's always going to be somebody else coming up and challenge them eventually, even if you're a Jordan or, one of the big names there. So I think, especially in the business world, it is very competitive, and a CEO has to meet certain numbers and will get a bonus if they perform, maybe not if they don't, maybe get fired if they don't perform. So there's a lot. It's very much like sports in that they're contracted and they have to perform at a certain level and they have to figure it out. So I think it's just natural that, for example, my experience, I bring that into coaching CEOs, executives, business owners. And so before I got into coaching, I was a psychotherapist. I still am a psychotherapist. So I'm trained in that. I'm licensed in 3 states to do that. Now, the main type of clients that were coming to see me were executives and business owners and athletes because they resonated with my about page on my website, right? It's like, oh, okay, here's a guy who's kind of like me. Maybe he's a little competitive. He kind of gets it. So I was working for years with this particular type of client. So I learned what worked with them, all the common pitfalls. And so to this day, I'll get a client in psychotherapy and I can say, this is such a great fit. Here are all the same kind of issues. I can really help this person. So I decided to translate that more into coaching because I could condense everything I learned in psychotherapy into a program that really pushes the person. And I think it's important to be clear there's a difference between therapy and coaching. Okay. So you come to therapy if you have some, I'll call it repair work, almost like an automobile. Like there's something wrong here. I need to get this repaired and I get back to my normal baseline. So this could be like some, really bad anxiety or some depression. And there's some repair work going on in the therapy. In the coaching space, there could still be a problem. Of course, there's always some sort of a problem, but there's not, I would say, like a clinical level of symptoms going on. The person in coaching is more ready. There's not a major stressor in my life. My marriage isn't falling apart. We have a good solid foundation to work on toward growth. Not that can't happen in psychotherapy, but there's two different kinds of clients there. So my background in psychotherapy is really helpful because I can meet someone who wants to do coaching with me, and I do a pretty robust assessment on them, and I may find out in that assessment that you know what, I have a really good friend who's a great marriage counselor. Go to them first, get everything solidified. Give me a call back, right? So my background in therapy does help my coaching for sure.
Oh, no question, no question at all. I'm going to give you a plug that you didn't even know was coming here because I'm working with an executive coach right now who is a PhD in psychology, and he's a coach. He is coaching me. However, my gosh, the knowledge that he has is so beneficial within the coaching realm. So, guys, if you're looking for a coach, especially a sports psychology coach,
Yeah,
no, without the P and the H and the D, which is a wonderful thing. And I don't have any disrespect. I have nothing but respect for people who stick to it and have gone through everything it took to get that stamp of approval. And most of them will tell you they've learned more outside of a classroom. And that's just the way it is. The other thing to think of is they are learning with the people they're helping. So at one point, I owned a Remax, and there was a young lady. Remax decided that the upper echelon decided that we should all have coaches. The owners should have coaches. And so they hired this young lady who had never owned a business, who had never done anything. And she said none of the other owners are really that interested in being coached by me. Why are you? I said, because you're coaching other owners. You're learning from other owners, and I can learn what you learned from them, even if you've never owned a Remax yourself.
yeah,
So
yeah. Getting that real world experience for sure. Yeah.
there you go. There you go. It helps a lot. So give us a story. Obviously, you don't need to use a name, but give us a story of someone who came into you as this person, and by the time they were done their coaching with you, their trajectory is completely different.
Yeah. Yeah, a number of clients. Again, like I said, my websites have several of them for psychotherapy. Attract for some reason, I don't know why, like a certain client who has a lot of similarities. So I'll give an amalgamation sort of imaginary client here. So I'll call this person a business owner. And let's say that their business is, oh, I don't know, maybe at $1 million a year. And it's a small business. Let's say it's a HVAC company or something like that. And they have maybe a couple employees, and they've hit a plateau. So a common theme in my work is people hitting these performance plateaus, right? And feeling frustrated, and there's sort of a mental block there. Like, what's going on? maybe even some self-sabotage, things like this. So this is a typical client. They'll be at a particular plateau and they'll have maybe some issues with employees. Their personality is such that they're maybe a little too nice, and some of the employees might take advantage of them. So the intentions of this particular client, business owner, are good, but they don't have the boundary skills with people. They don't have some of those a little more firmer kind of relationship skills. And that's one of the big things I see in working with, say, like business owners, executives, CEOs, and they do have a team, and they may be a little too nice, right? And you don't want to go the other way. You don't want to be a tyrant, right? But one of the big epiphanies my clients have is that people are responsible for themselves, and that the contract, if you have employees, is you pay them a market value for their labor, and they're adults, and treat them as adults. And what this often, yeah, is a big realization for people. I was like, oh, I don't have to micromanage, right? Ooh, I can let that go. And if they don't perform, they can go work somewhere else, and that's okay, right? So this is hugely liberating for a lot of, I would say, business owners, CEOs, executives. Is like, oh, I can fire people, right? And this thing about firing people is such a terrible thing, and I'm ruining their lives. It's like, well, if they're not a good fit, you're doing them a disservice by enabling their lower performance. Maybe they don't even really want to do what they're doing, and you could liberate them and they could go off and do whatever, right? So this is a big thing. What gets people past this particular performance plateau is letting go a lot of these duties and micromanaging, and all this energy just gets freed up. Like, oh, I was hired to be a visionary, or I'm a business owner. I'm a visionary. Let's now have all this extra energy. I can go up to that next level, and it happens, Kara, like almost overnight when that energy frees up and they realize what their role is and what their potential is, and just, yeah, they're just unleashed. And I love working with people who do that. It's very gratifying to just show them like, hey, what about that? Peek around that corner. Here's some more knowledge here, right? And I do a lot of in vivo kind of role play actually during coaching. So
Okay, in vivo.
well, live. So like if I were to be coaching you, right, and we even do it over video, I would pretend, for example, maybe you want to sell me a house or something like that, right? And I could play the role of a very difficult buyer who's very high needs, who, pushes back, maybe calls you late, texts you, all of these things, and you feel, oh, I got to really sell this house and this person, and I got to bend over backwards for them and all this kind of stuff. And I do these role plays during coaching sessions, and people get like battle tested, and then they go out into the real world and they go, I got this, right? I know, I'm in this safe environment with Michael. We're just practicing, and he really pushed me to my limit, and I learned how to say no and how to push back and set boundaries. Or, and so I love doing that, not just talking about it like, hey, go out and do this, here's your homework for our next coaching session, but like, let's do it right now. Let's pretend your worst fear is happening right now on this call, and let's work it out and let's learn from it. So I like doing that a lot.
Gosh, that's powerful, Michael. One of the things you're also known for is you say that you need to use offense, not just in sports, but in life.
Yeah.
Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So I would say that defense is inevitable in life. You're going to get hit with a challenge where you're going to have to regroup. You may be charging forward in your business or even in your marriage. It could be anything. And you hit a bump in the road and you have to stop. And I'll call that kind of inevitable defense. You need to kind of look around and assess, but you don't want to be stagnant. You don't want to be, the solution to your problem should not be, let's put this on the back burner. Let's deal with this later. Let's avoid this. I'm afraid to go to couples therapy. Our marriage is good enough. It's pretty good. My business is doing pretty good. I shouldn't really push the limit. I don't want to take that risk, right? We tend to, when the challenges come, very naturally kind of shrink a little bit and regroup. And I think that's okay, but you really want to have your game plan going forward, right? So with the couple, let's dive into couples therapy. Let's do this. Like, what's the worst that could happen? We'll have a couple more arguments. We're already arguing, right? Let me expand my business. I need to because my competitor's doing the same thing. Like maybe that's the actual plan, and you develop a plan to go forward instead of saying, it's good enough. Because ultimately, this is my philosophy anyway, we're much happier when we're growing. If we're
Amen.
stagnant, if we're playing defense, it's boring. And there's not that same kind of excitement or energy. We're just kind of playing it safe. We're just kind of looking around. What are other people doing? Maybe I should do that, you know? You got to play offense. You got to go out there and push the limit. So, yeah, offense all the way.
Offense, offense, offense.
Yeah.
Okay. So someone, I'm making an assumption here, and you can shut me down if I'm wrong, please do. I'm assuming that women are much more likely to agree to couples counseling than men.
Um, Surprisingly, and at least in my experience, it's about 50-50.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. Now, mind you, I work mostly with men in my therapy practice. So, sample size, et cetera. I would have to look into some data on that of like who's more willing or who initiates couples counseling. Now, the stats on individual counseling is more women typically seek out individual counseling, and men typically do not. And often I'll get a phone call from or an email or whatever from a wife who's sending her husband to therapy, right?
Yeah, that doesn't work, does it?
Well, it can, but I'm very transparent. I say, I'll work with you if you want to go to therapy, right? And it's not to make your wife happy, right? It's because if you want to be here. And so that can work actually, can work sometimes. But to your question, generally in seeking, say, therapy, maybe not coaching, but therapy, women tend to be more open to going to it. Whether that in couples, I'm not sure. I don't have the data on that. When in the coaching world, it is a little more even. It skews a little bit more toward men for coaching. Just I think because of the name, right? It's coaching. It's not, not counseling. So
Yeah. Okay. So someone's thinking about counseling, but okay, my philosophy is there's the 80-20 rule, and 80% of any profession really is not very good at it.
Mhm.
20% is excellent. So
Mhm.
how does someone not make the mistake of getting a lousy
Mhm.
therapist?
Yeah. So this is a really great question because oftentimes people, maybe their first experience in therapy, maybe as a teenager or maybe in college, was negative, and they feel that, like it doesn't work. They don't get me. I don't like it. So you're right. I think in a lot of professions there is that, the cream rises to the top, right? Um, so it's not that you necessarily have to have like the best top therapist, but you have to have somebody that you feel comfortable with. And same thing with coaching too. Does this person, do they get me? Are they relatable? Are they good enough, frankly? Right. Now, I'm not a good enough kind of person. I always want so if I have a coach, I want them to be really, really good, right? But even if someone has a sterling reputation and they're, like $1,000 an hour or whatever it is, they're like the best. They may not be the best coach for me. I may not resonate with them, right? So I think for someone seeking, as you asked, therapy, treat it like an interview process, right? Does the therapist offer a free phone consultation, like a discovery call? Most of them do, right? And it's free, and you just throw them a bunch of stuff. Hey, what do you think of this? And if you like what you hear, great, go for it, right? And then you're the boss, so like you can fire them after one session if you don't like it. And it's often a numbers game. So I tell people like, don't be afraid to try a couple therapists, but it's really that first initial impression. If you're feeling heard, if it's feeling like it's going to work good enough for your goals and your means, I would say go for it.
Okay. So for the most part, what I'm hearing you say is incredibly encouraging for someone who's thinking about it. You can try before you buy
Yeah.
most. And if someone doesn't have that option, maybe you don't even entertain them at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And when we're talking about, say, therapy as opposed to coaching, therapy is often covered by insurance plans, right? And so you may, I'll call it, fall into the trap of I want to save money on therapy, right? And I want to go through my insurance and I want to get the best, the first person who has a nice photo, and I'm just going to go for it. And that's kind of the way therapy works. And I would say, no, 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 no. If you're doing therapy through your insurance to save some money, or if you're doing private pay out of pocket, the rule applies. You have to resonate with that person. You have to feel like it's a good fit. So there is some shopping around. I would say probably 3, 4 people, maybe do the phone calls up front. Even if the first one feels amazing, it's like, okay, well, let's do like, I'm going to talk to at least 5 therapists, or I'm going to talk to at least 5 coaches and interview them. And whichever one feels like a green light, I'm going to choose them and go for it. So that's, I think, a mistake that consumers make is there's also a bit of a power differential too. So the therapist they must know best, or this coach, boy, they have all these endorsements. I don't quite vibe with them, but they must be good, right? No, 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 no. You're the customer, and you get to interview all these people, and there's a ton of them out there, and ultimately you decide. So I would say plan on interviewing 5 people, either if you're going therapy or coaching, and just say, I'm the consumer, I'm paying this person, and it's got to feel good, but I'm not afraid to do that interview process, right? And get
Right.
over that power differential. Like they're there to help you. You're not there to, be this poor victim who needs help and they know everything. No, no, no. So yeah, interview a lot of people.
All right. All right. So they're not the rescuer and you're not the victim. You
Correct.
get to pick and choose. I love that. So just some coaching for everybody listening right now. Give us some daily habits that would help us.
Yeah. I'm glad you're asking me that because it's so much about habits. It really, really is. So if you can do some sort of journaling, and I call it especially like gratitude journaling, it's very trendy now. It's almost a cliche, like I'm grateful for, but I'll tell you, you can train your brain to start looking for positive things in life. So one of the habits I have everybody do, whether it's coaching or therapy, is write down 3 things you're grateful for every single morning, whether you like it or not. Weekends are optional. You might have some other stuff going on, but weekdays, Monday through Friday, I had my journal almost at arm's reach here. But you just have it open, you prep it the night before, and you write down 1, 2, 3. And you literally write down 3 things you're grateful for. And one of the things this morning is I got up early for a bike ride at around 5 and wasn't too happy. So I wrote down coffee as one of the things I was grateful for, right? And that started I kind of laughed about that. And then I wrote down a couple more things. So that's one of the key habits for happiness and high performance. Happiness in that if you don't feel the emotion of gratitude for what's already great all around you, the abundance around you, your mind is going to naturally go for problems. The brain is a problem-seeking machine. It loves problems. It's like a dog with a bone. It loves to just chew on problems, look for problems that aren't there. That's the default. That's the wiring that we have. And thank goodness, because that keeps us alive. It gets us going through the end of the day. We worry about what's the worst that could happen. Where are all the problems? Okay, that's good. But if you try this gratitude exercise, you start to train your brain in a different way. What could go right? What is already going good? And it's really counterintuitive. again, we get back to offense and defense, right? So the brain's default mode is kind of defense, fight or flight, protectiveness. If you do this gratitude exercise, you literally start noticing opportunities out there. Whereas before you had the blinders on and you didn't even see them, right? So this is important. Let's say that you have a business that's you're really struggling with, and you could focus on, oh God, do I have enough money to, do payroll? You could, well, of course, you already know that. You don't need to think more about that, right? You need to be smart about it, but you don't need to dwell on it. You need to say, I have a roof over my head, I have food, I have, even if my business fails, I'll be okay. I have family, I have friends, and that gets you into a much more just a much more productive state because you're like, all right, let's go forward, let's go on offense instead of here's all the problems we need to play defense. So it's a little counterintuitive, but to answer your question, if you can do gratitude in the morning every single day and spend 3 to 5 minutes, that's it. The repetition day after day after day will build new neural pathways in your brain. Think about them like paths in the woods. Right? You're making a new path and you have access to this particular path, which has a nicer view, which has more sunshine, which feels good. And when you're in that state, you make business decisions differently. You make sporting decisions differently. You do if you're a CEO, like you might take a risk. You might have a brilliant idea. So gratitude is huge. So that's just one of the many things I prescribe for people for daily habits.
Very cool. And then you just dove into my favorite topic, and that's the plasticity of the brain. Wow. I mean, tell me what, because this is your field,
Mhm.
in the past 10 years or so, everything that's been discovered, how excited are you to be studying all this stuff right now?
It's incredible. It really is. Just what we're learning about the brain. Um, and yeah, so like there's something called state versus trait psychology. So state at any given time, like I'm in a particular state right now. Half hour ago, I was in a different state, right? I was like a little nervous for the interview, Now I'm feeling like I'm in the flow. So I'm in a particular state. I'm literally a different person right now than I was, say, like a half hour ago. So it's important to think about that. If you're in a habit of thinking negatively, it's just a question of practice, like repetition, like weightlifting, and your brain can literally make these new neural pathways. And you become slowly through repetition by changing your state on a daily basis, you change your trait, and your personality literally starts to change to maybe a more optimistic person. Okay. So it's really a lot of repetition. And what's funny is even if you don't believe the gratitude and you're like, this is hokey, this is stupid, you're doing it through repetition. You're going to start seeing some changes just through the repetition. So that a personality is malleable. That said, it's important to understand that a lot of the research shows that personalities are like one of the most important factors, say like in hiring a CEO or a business owner, you have to have the personality for it. But what I'm saying is that through repetition and intention, you can change a lot of your inherent traits, right? The unchangeable traits can start to shift. Now, whether you become a completely different person, I don't know, maybe, but the point is that you have a lot of power in changing your so-called, hardwired personality traits just by doing some habits.
It is, success is really very, very boring. It really is. It's doing the same things over and over and over again and trusting.
Uh-huh.
As far as the gratitude goes, I had heard to write for me, it's 5 things, and it's
Mhm.
within the past 24 hours, so that
Okay.
your brain is actually seeking,
Yep.
looking for what's right.
Yes.
And it does change. I mean, it does change. Guys, think about it. Who do you want to hang out with? Do you want to hang out with the person that's always got a complaint? It's like, oh, I see John coming. Oh gosh, please don't
Mm.
talk to me because he's going to complain and whine, and he doesn't
Yeah.
want to fix it. He doesn't want to do anything about it. Right? So John could come to you And within how long could he really have changed and become more of who he really should be?
This is one of the traps for coaches and or therapists, is that you can't necessarily save anybody, right? The person has to want to do that. And it's, again, it's one of these counterintuitive things. The less you try to push somebody in a direction, the more you see if they really want to do it. So it's not like hands-off coaching, but it's more like if you let go of your own expectation, the person's going to feel that vibe of literally of empowerment. Like, I'm not being infantilized right now by this coach or this therapist. Like, oh, they're trusting me to change on my own. It doesn't mean you don't try, and it doesn't mean like I'm not enthusiastic. And I love it when people learn things. But ultimately, I'm like, it's up to them, right? So I want to point that out first of all. So to your question, how long would it take John to shift and change? It depends on what I deliver, what I can reveal to John. I can show you, I can show you the water, lead the horse to water, right? But they need to drink. Strange metaphor, because they're, clients aren't horses, but yeah, it's really true though. It's an apt metaphor. And it's my job to show them, here's all the stuff, here's all the tools, try it. It's up to you if it starts to click and momentum goes. I can't necessarily be your cheerleader. So that's the dynamic there. So that it's in the coaching world or therapy world, there's this dynamic between the two people working together. And that's why I said before, like, it has to feel like a click. Like, you don't have to love or like the person, but it has to feel like, this feels right, you know? So yeah, it's a lot about the dynamic.
Some of I think a lot of you that are listening to this podcast in particular are very driven, and you're a little bit different than the average bear. And so when it comes to coaching, you may want to pick someone that you don't really like that much, because you know that they will not put up with your BS. You know that they, like, I really, really want to get to the next level. And if I pick this guy that's super sweet and just, I can get along with him great and I'll have a new friend. But if I pick this guy or this gal who they're no nonsense, what did that might be what you need. So
Right.
consider
That's
that in your.
excellent point. If you have a too nice of a coach, right, they may not push you enough, right? If you're happy all the time in coaching, it's like, yeah, maybe maybe you're not being pushed enough. So it's a great point.
Yeah. Gosh, I think we could do this for hours. But in respect for your time, we're gonna bring it in, and I've got a couple questions that I ask everybody at the end. And one of them is, you're living a pretty epic life. What tips or tricks could you give our people to help them live their own epic life?
Try and experiment. If you want to live a more epic life, there's often the mental barrier of a commitment to being, oh, I'm not that kind of person. I don't know if I could do that. That's too daunting. I don't want to open my own business, or I don't want to try that sport. I don't want to travel to around the world. Like, okay, why don't you try and experiment? Get a taste. We call it a taste of the ice cream before you commit to buying the ice cream cone. Like, what if I shadowed a business owner? Or what if something that can get me out of my comfort zone, but it's not too scary? And once I get a taste of that more epic life, I get it out of your mind and into practice. Maybe I can do a 10K and walk the entire 10K run, and just notice all the awesome, amazing people around me and go, wow, you're doing this, right? So try and experiment. Try one little thing that makes you feel a little uncomfortable, and just do it and see if you like that. If you like it, try a little more and try a little more. Then you buy the whole pint of ice cream, and then you're on your way.
That is beautiful, brilliant advice. I love that. What books, tapes, podcasts, tapes, that I'm dating myself.
I remember
what?
tapes. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I wore them out so bad, so many of
Yep.
them.
Me too.
But what do you recommend that people for their mental diet?
Yeah. Um, let's see. I like Lewis Howe's School of Greatness podcast. He has wonderful guests on there, amazing guests. Your podcast, you have a lot of interesting people. I have a podcast. It's called Michael Ceely's High Performance Podcast. And so a lot of athletes on there. I'm starting to interview a lot more like executives, business owners, and also a lot more women too, because I was interviewing mainly men before that. But I'm loving doing my podcast. I would say anything that makes you feel just full of joy or enthusiastic, paying attention to your emotions. How does the podcast make you feel? Do you feel like doing something afterwards, or do you feel like it was complaining and it's negative and they're talking about how bad the world is? And there's plenty of stuff out there like that. Choose something that just makes you feel good and have that as your diet, for your podcast. Books. I'm a big fan of self-help psychology books. There's a lot of good ones out there. The classic one from way back in the day is called Feeling Good by Dr. David Burns. It's a cognitive behavioral therapy book. It's almost like a second or third Bible for me. It's like it's right there. It's got a lot of good stuff in there. I have a book coming out this year in 2025. I'm pretty excited about that. It's called The Only Way Is Up, and it's about mentors who showed up in my life. And my first therapist is in there, and that's a whole nother story. He was great. And talk about people that I didn't really like at first, who were hard on me. That guy is in the book. So that's coming out. You can check it out on my website, michaelceely.com. It's there, and you can sign up for that. But yeah, just your mental diet should be as good as your regular diet. Don't eat junk food. Don't have mental junk food in your books, videos, everything like that.
Got it. A book that I don't know if you've heard of or not, but I guarantee you would love is called Spark. And
Hmm.
it's so brilliant about what happens when you do ride a bicycle, when you do run or walk, or when you get the aerobic, what it does for your brain is
Mhm.
shocking. It is amazing. And so guys,
Okay.
it's not just about, getting a coach or a therapist, whichever you might want to use Michael for, but it's also move. You have to move. You've got to get your heart rate up because it cleanses you. You've got to breathe. You deeply breathe. That's what happens when you're on that bike, right?
That's right. We are biochemical beings, so yeah, exercise is the key for sure.
Yeah. Michael, thank you so much. We really appreciate you giving all of your incredible ideas to us, and looking forward to that book. If you send me an advance copy, I'll have you back on, and I'll read it, and then we'll just go through your book and talk about it.
I love it. We'll do
Okay.
it.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.